I still remember that morning like it was yesterday. I woke up and tried to get out of bed, but my knees, they just wouldn't cooperate. The pain was so intense that I had to grab onto my nightstand to pull myself up. I was 68 years old, and suddenly the simple act of standing had become a mountain to climb. Have you ever felt like your body was betraying you? Like the independence you've cherished your whole life was slipping away with each painful step? If you're watching this and you're over 60, I have a feeling you know exactly what I'm talking about. My name is Robert, and 3 years ago I thought my active life was over. Today, at 71, I walk 2 miles every morning, play with my grandchildren without pain, and even started gardening again. Something I thought I'd never do. What changed? It wasn't surgery. It wasn't expensive medications with side effects that made me feel worse than the pain itself. It was something much simpler, my diet. Now, I'm not a doctor or a nutritionist. I'm just an ordinary guy who was desperate to find a solution. A retired high school teacher who refused to spend his golden years sitting in a recliner, watching life pass by through the window. And what I discovered about the connection between certain foods and joint pain changed everything for me. Let me take you back to where it all began. I've always been reasonably active, nothing extreme, mind you. I coached baseball for 30 years, enjoyed weekend hikes with my wife Susan, and took pride in maintaining our home and garden. But around my mid-60s, things started to change. First, it was just a little stiffness in the morning. Part of getting older, I told myself. But then came the pain, first in my knees, then my hips, and eventually my hands. Simple things like opening a jar, walking upstairs, or getting out of the car became painful challenges. I remember one particular day that still brings tears to my eyes when I think about it. My 5-year-old granddaughter Emma came running to me, arms outstretched, yelling, "Swing me, Grandpa! Swing me!" It was our special game. I would hold her hands and spin her around in circles while she giggled uncontrollably. But that day I couldn't do it. The pain in my shoulders and hands was too intense. The look of disappointment on her little face when I had to say no broke my heart. That night, I sat in my chair, feeling utterly defeated. Susan quietly brought me an ice pack for my knees and sat beside me. "Robert," she said gently, "we need to do something. This isn't living." She was right. I was existing, not living. The next day, I made an appointment with my doctor. After several tests, x-rays, and referrals to specialists, the diagnosis was clear: osteoarthritis in multiple joints. "It's quite advanced," the doctor said, looking at my x-rays. "We can manage the pain with medication, but there's no cure. It's degenerative, so it will likely get worse over time." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Worse? Doc, I can barely walk now." "What do you mean, worse?" He looked at me sympathetically. That look doctors give when they don't have good news. "We'll start you on anti-inflammatory medications. They should help with the pain, but they can be hard on your stomach and kidneys long-term. We'll need to monitor you closely." I left his office with prescriptions and pamphlets about living with chronic pain. But something inside me refused to accept that this was it, that the rest of my life would be defined by pain and limitation. There had to be another way. That's when my journey really began. I started researching everything I could about arthritis. I read medical journals, joined online forums, and talked to everyone who might have insights. Most of what I found was discouraging. The same message the doctor had given me. Manage the pain, slow the progression, but accept the limitations. But then I stumbled upon something interesting: studies suggesting that certain foods might increase inflammation in the body, while others might reduce it. And since inflammation is a major factor in arthritis pain, I wondered, could changing what I eat actually help with my pain? Susan was skeptical but supportive. "What do we have to lose?" she said. And she was right. The medications were helping somewhat, but they were also giving me stomach problems and making me feel foggy. If there was even a small chance that food could help, it was worth trying. I started keeping a detailed journal, noting what I ate and how my pain levels fluctuated. After a few weeks, patterns began to emerge. Certain foods seemed to make the pain worse the next day, while others appeared to help. It wasn't dramatic at first, just subtle differences. But those small changes gave me hope. Then came my big breakthrough. I was at the farmer's market one Saturday morning, moving slowly with my cane, when I met an older gentleman named Frank. He was in his 80s but moved with the ease of someone decades younger. We got to talking, and when I mentioned my arthritis, he smiled knowingly. "Changed my diet 15 years ago," he said. "Best decision I ever made. Doctors wanted to replace both my knees, but I never needed the surgery." He then shared with me his joint-friendly food list. 10 specific foods he ate regularly that he credited with his remarkable mobility. I was intrigued but cautious. Could it really be that simple? Could the answer to my prayers be in my kitchen, not the pharmacy? I decided to give Frank's food list a try. I had nothing to lose and everything to gain. What happened next surprised even my skeptical doctor. Within 3 weeks, I noticed a difference. The morning stiffness wasn't lasting as long. By 6 weeks, I was taking fewer pain medications. And after 3 months, I had days, actual blessed days, where I experienced almost no pain at all. Now, I need to be clear about something. What I'm about to share with you isn't a miracle cure. I still have arthritis. There are still bad days. But the difference in my quality of life is like night and day. And the best part? No side effects. Just real, whole foods that have been shown to help reduce inflammation and support joint health. So, if you're struggling with joint pain, if you're tired of depending on medications that only mask the symptoms, or if you're simply looking for natural ways to keep your joints healthy as you age, stay with me. In the next sections, I'll share the 10 specific foods that made the biggest difference for me, how to incorporate them into your diet, and the science behind why they work. Because here's what I've learned. We may not be able to turn back the clock, but we absolutely can improve the quality of our golden years. And it starts with what we put on our plates. Let me tell you about the first 5 foods that changed everything for me. These aren't exotic superfoods you need to order online or strange ingredients you've never heard of. They're simple, affordable items you can find at any grocery store. But when it comes to fighting joint pain, they're absolute powerhouses. The first food on my list, and the one that made the most dramatic difference for me, is fatty fish. Specifically, salmon, mackerel, sardines, and trout. I know. Some of you might be wrinkling your noses right now. Fish? Really, Robert? That was exactly my reaction too. I was never a big fish eater. Growing up in the Midwest, our idea of seafood was fish sticks on Friday nights. But here's what changed my mind. These fatty fish are loaded with omega-3 fatty acids, which are some of the most powerful natural anti-inflammatory compounds you can consume. My doctor had actually mentioned omega-3 supplements before, but I never connected the dots to actual fish. I started simple, having salmon for dinner twice a week. Susan found a recipe for honey garlic salmon that was so delicious. I actually looked forward to our fish nights. Within just 3 weeks, I noticed that the throbbing pain in my knees wasn't quite as intense in the mornings after I'd had fish for dinner. Now, if you absolutely cannot stand fish, there are other options. Flax seeds, chia seeds, and walnuts also contain omega-3s, though they're not quite as potent as the type found in fish. You could also consider a high-quality fish oil supplement, but I always prefer getting nutrients from real food whenever possible. The second food that became my joint's best friend was tart cherries. Not the sweet cherries you might snack on in summer, but specifically tart cherries or tart cherry juice. These little ruby gems contain compounds called anthocyanins that have been shown to reduce inflammation and pain in some studies. I started drinking a small glass of unsweetened tart cherry juice every morning. It's quite tart, as the name suggests, so at first I would mix it with a little water. But I grew to love the tangy flavor. What I loved even more was what it did for my hands. The stiffness that had made it so difficult to button my shirts or open jars began to improve after about a month of daily tart cherry juice. There was this moment I'll never forget. I was playing with my granddaughter Emma, and she asked me to help her with a puzzle. Without thinking, I sat down on the floor with her and worked on that puzzle for almost an hour. It wasn't until Susan pointed it out later that I realized what had happened. "Robert, do you know you just sat on the floor for an hour and then got up without help?" I hadn't even noticed. That's when I knew something was really changing. The third food that made a huge difference was turmeric. Now, this bright yellow spice has been used in traditional medicine for thousands of years, but I had only known it as the thing that makes curry yellow. I learned that turmeric contains an active compound called curcumin, which has powerful anti-inflammatory properties. The challenge with turmeric is that curcumin isn't easily absorbed by the body. But I discovered a little trick. Combining turmeric with black pepper and a small amount of healthy fat dramatically increases its absorption. So I started making what my grandkids now call Grandpa's golden milk: warm almond milk with turmeric, a pinch of black pepper, a little honey, and a teaspoon of coconut oil. I drink this every evening before bed, and it's become a soothing ritual that I look forward to. Within 2 months of adding this golden milk to my routine, the constant ache in my hips had diminished considerably. I could walk for longer periods without needing to stop and rest. The first time I made it all the way around our neighborhood without my cane was a day of celebration in our house. Fourth on my list are berries, especially blueberries, strawberries, and blackberries. These colorful little fruits are packed with antioxidants called flavonoids that help fight inflammation. They're also low in sugar compared to many other fruits, which is important because excess sugar can actually increase inflammation. I started having a cup of mixed berries with my breakfast every morning. Sometimes fresh, sometimes frozen, depending on the season. They're delicious on oatmeal, in yogurt, or just by themselves as a snack. What I noticed after incorporating berries regularly was that the swelling in my joints, particularly my fingers, was less pronounced. I could actually see the difference. My wedding ring wasn't as tight, and my hands looked less puffy in the mornings. The fifth food that helped transform my joint health was extra virgin olive oil. I had always used vegetable oil or butter for cooking, but after learning about the anti-inflammatory properties of olive oil, I made the switch. Extra virgin olive oil contains a compound called oleocanthal, which has been shown to have similar anti-inflammatory effects as ibuprofen, though much milder, of course. Making this switch was easy. I just started using olive oil for cooking, in salad dressings, and even drizzled a little on my vegetables. It has a lovely flavor that actually enhances the taste of food. After a few months of using olive oil as my primary fat, I noticed that the overall level of pain and stiffness in my body had decreased. Now, I want to be completely honest with you. None of these foods worked overnight. This wasn't like taking a pain pill and feeling relief 30 minutes later. The effects were gradual, building over weeks and months. There were days when I wondered if anything was really changing. But I kept at it, faithfully including these foods in my diet day after day. And then one morning, about 4 months after I started this journey, I had this moment of realization. I had gotten out of bed, gotten dressed, made breakfast, and taken the dog out, all before I remembered that I should be in pain. My movements weren't perfect, and yes, there was still some stiffness, but the debilitating pain that had become my constant companion was noticeably diminished. That's the thing about using food as medicine. It's not dramatic or instant, but the effects can be profound and long-lasting. And unlike many medications, these foods don't just mask symptoms. They address the underlying inflammation that causes the pain in the first place. But I didn't stop with just these 5 foods. As my research continued and my body responded positively to these changes, I discovered 5 more foods that took my joint health to the next level. And I'll share those with you in just a moment. Before I do, though, I want to emphasize something important. Consistency is key. Adding these foods to your diet once in a while won't do much. It's the regular, daily consumption that makes the difference. Think of it as making deposits in your joint health bank account. Each healthy meal is a deposit that adds up over time. And here's another crucial point. While adding these beneficial foods, I was also eliminating certain foods that seemed to make my inflammation worse. For me, that included processed foods, excessive sugar, and certain vegetable oils. Your triggers might be different, but paying attention to what makes your pain worse is just as important as knowing what makes it better. Now, let's move on to the next 5 foods that helped me reclaim my active life and might help you do the same. The next 5 foods on my list might surprise you. They certainly surprised me when I first learned about their benefits for joint health. But they've become staples in my diet, and the results speak for themselves. Number 6 on my list is ginger. Like its cousin turmeric, ginger has been used medicinally for centuries. It contains compounds called gingerols that have powerful anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects. What's particularly interesting about ginger is that some studies have shown it can reduce pain and disability in people with osteoarthritis, much like mine. I started incorporating ginger into my diet in several ways. I would grate fresh ginger into stir-fries, add it to smoothies, or make a simple ginger tea by steeping sliced ginger in hot water with a little honey. My favorite, though, is starting my day with a shot of fire water, as I call it, hot water with freshly grated ginger, a squeeze of lemon, and a small spoonful of honey. It wakes me up better than coffee ever did and gives my body that anti-inflammatory boost first thing in the morning. After about a month of having ginger daily, I noticed something remarkable. The stiffness that typically plagued me for the first hour or two after waking up was resolving much faster. Instead of hobbling around until mid-morning, I was moving more freely within 15 to 20 minutes of getting out of bed. For anyone with arthritis, you know what a gift that is. The seventh food that made a significant difference for me was nuts, particularly walnuts, almonds, and pine nuts. These are rich in alpha-linolenic acid, an omega-3 fatty acid, as well as other anti-inflammatory compounds. They're also packed with vitamin E, which some studies suggest may protect joints from oxidative damage. I started having a small handful of mixed nuts as a mid-morning snack. I'm careful about portions because nuts are calorie-dense, but even a quarter cup daily seemed to help. What I noticed after adding nuts regularly was that the grinding sensation in my knees when climbing stairs was less pronounced. It wasn't gone completely, but it was definitely improved. There was this moment, about 2 months after adding nuts to my daily routine, when I realized I had walked up the entire flight of stairs to our bedroom without holding onto the railing. Susan noticed it too, and we both just stood there, a little teary-eyed at this simple victory. The eighth food might seem obvious, but it's one many people don't eat enough of: dark, leafy greens. Spinach, kale, collard greens, and Swiss chard are powerhouses of nutrients, including antioxidants, calcium, vitamin D, and vitamin K, all of which are important for joint health. I'll be honest, this one was a challenge for me at first. I wasn't much of a greens person. The turning point came when Susan started making smoothies with spinach, berries, and a bit of ginger. The berries completely masked the taste of the spinach, but I was still getting all those nutrients. We also started having big salads for lunch, and I discovered that I actually enjoyed kale when it was massaged with a little olive oil and lemon juice to soften it. After incorporating dark greens regularly, I noticed improvements in my overall energy levels, which made it easier to stay active. And staying active, as any doctor will tell you, is crucial for managing arthritis. It's a virtuous cycle. Less pain means more movement, which means stronger muscles supporting the joints, which means less pain, and so on. Number 9 on my list is something many of us love but might not think of as health food: garlic. This pungent bulb contains diallyl disulfide, an anti-inflammatory compound that limits the effects of pro-inflammatory cytokines. In simpler terms, it helps fight the inflammation that causes joint pain. I started adding garlic to almost everything I cooked: soups, stews, stir-fries, even roasted vegetables. Fresh garlic is best, but the pre-minced kind in jars works too if chopping is hard on your hands. Just be sure it doesn't contain added sugar or preservatives. The effects of garlic were more subtle than some of the other foods, but after a few months, I noticed that the overall background level of inflammation in my body seemed lower. My joints were less swollen, and I could tolerate more activity before pain would set in. The 10th and final food on my list is one that might raise a few eyebrows: bone broth. Yes, good old-fashioned bone broth like our grandmothers used to make. Bone broth is rich in glucosamine, chondroitin, and collagen, all compounds that support joint health. It also contains minerals like calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus that are important for bone strength. I started making bone broth in my slow cooker using chicken or beef bones, which you can get very cheaply from your butcher. I'd simmer them with vegetables, herbs, and a splash of apple cider vinegar, which helps extract the minerals from the bones, for 24 to 48 hours. The resulting broth became the base for soups and stews, or sometimes I'd just sip it like tea. After adding bone broth to my routine several times a week, I noticed improvements in the stability of my joints, particularly my knees. They didn't give way unexpectedly as often, which had been a frightening and dangerous problem before. There was this wonderful moment about 6 months into my food journey that really brought home how far I'd come. My son had organized a family picnic at a local park. In the past, I would have been anxious about the uneven ground, the lack of places to sit, the distance from the car. But that day, I walked across the grass without my cane, sat on a blanket on the ground with my grandchildren, and later even joined in a gentle game of catch. My son took a photo of me laughing as I tossed a ball with Emma, a photo that now sits on my bedside table as a reminder of what's possible. Now, I want to address something important. You might be thinking, "That's great for you, Robert, but my joint pain is severe. Can food really make that much of a difference?" It's a fair question, and the answer is nuanced. These foods helped me tremendously, but they didn't completely eliminate my arthritis. I still have an incurable, degenerative condition. What these dietary changes did was reduce the inflammation enough to make my pain manageable without heavy medications. They gave me back my quality of life. If you're currently taking medications for arthritis or other conditions, please don't stop them without talking to your doctor. What I'm suggesting is adding these beneficial foods alongside your current treatment. You might find, as I did, that over time you need less medication, but that should always be a decision made with medical supervision. It's also worth noting that what worked for me might not work exactly the same way for you. We're all different, with unique bodies, genetics, and conditions. The foods I've shared are generally recognized for their anti-inflammatory properties, but you might find that some help you more than others. That's why I encourage you to keep a food and symptom journal as you incorporate these foods into your diet. Note what you eat and how your pain and mobility are affected in the hours and days afterward. Over time, patterns will emerge that can guide your personal joint-healthy diet. In the final part of our discussion, I'll share how I combine these foods into a practical daily eating plan, some simple recipes that make it easy to get these nutrients regularly, and additional lifestyle changes that complemented my dietary approach to create even greater improvements in my joint health. Because while food was the foundation of my recovery, I discovered that certain ways of preparing and combining these foods, as well as other lifestyle factors, created a synergistic effect that amplified the benefits. And I want you to have every advantage in your journey toward better mobility and less pain. Let me share with you how I actually incorporate these foods into my everyday life. Because let's be honest, knowing which foods are good for your joints is one thing, but figuring out how to eat them consistently is another challenge entirely. I've developed what I call my joint-friendly daily dozen, a simple framework that helps me make sure I'm getting these beneficial foods regularly without having to overthink every meal. It's not rigid or complicated, just a flexible guide that works with real life. For breakfast, I rotate between 3 main options. The first is overnight oats made with almond milk, topped with berries, walnuts, and a sprinkle of cinnamon. The second is a smoothie with spinach, berries, ginger, and a tablespoon of ground flaxseed. And the third is scrambled eggs with sautéed greens and a side of cherry tomatoes. Each of these breakfasts includes at least 2 of my joint-friendly foods, starts my day with anti-inflammatory nutrients, and keeps me satisfied until lunch. I also have my fire water ginger drink first thing most mornings, and a cup of tart cherry juice a couple of times a week. For lunch, I often have a large salad with dark leafy greens, colorful vegetables, some protein like salmon or chicken, a handful of nuts, and a dressing made with olive oil, garlic, and lemon juice. Other days, I'll have a bowl of homemade soup made with bone broth, loads of vegetables, and turmeric. Dinner in our house usually consists of a protein, often fatty fish twice a week, at least 2 vegetables prepared with olive oil and garlic, and sometimes a small portion of whole grains or starchy vegetables like sweet potatoes. For snacks, I stick with nuts, berries, vegetable sticks with hummus, or a small cup of bone broth. And in the evening, I have my golden milk with turmeric as a soothing ritual before bed. This way of eating ensures I'm getting all 10 of my joint-friendly foods regularly throughout the week, if not daily. And the wonderful thing is, it doesn't feel like a diet or a hardship. It's just delicious, satisfying food that happens to make my joints feel better. Now, I want to share a few simple recipes that have become staples in my kitchen. These make it easy to incorporate multiple joint-friendly foods in one delicious dish. My inflammation-fighting breakfast bowl combines several powerful foods. Cook half a cup of steel-cut oats in almond milk, Then top with a quarter cup of mixed berries, a tablespoon each of ground flax seeds and chopped walnuts, a teaspoon of honey, and a sprinkle of cinnamon. This single meal contains omega-3 fatty acids, antioxidants, and fiber that all work together to fight inflammation. For lunch, my joint mobility salad is unbeatable. Mix dark leafy greens with colorful vegetables, add a palm-sized portion of wild-caught salmon, a quarter of an avocado, a tablespoon of olive oil mixed with lemon juice and minced garlic for dressing, and top with a sprinkle of turmeric and black pepper. This combination provides a powerful dose of omega-3s, antioxidants, and natural anti-inflammatory compounds. For dinner, we love our golden healing soup. Sauté onions and garlic in olive oil, add chopped vegetables, whatever is in season, turmeric, black pepper, a chunk of fresh ginger, and bone broth. Simmer until vegetables are tender, then blend if desired. This soup is like medicine in a bowl. I can actually feel my body responding positively after eating it. Beyond specific recipes, I've discovered some preparation methods that maximize the benefits of these foods. For instance, letting chopped garlic sit for 10 to 15 minutes before cooking enhances its beneficial compounds. Adding black pepper whenever you use turmeric increases the absorption of curcumin by up to 2,000%. And eating berries at room temperature rather than cold from the refrigerator makes their antioxidants more bioavailable. Now, while food has been the foundation of my approach to managing joint pain, I found that certain lifestyle factors work synergistically with this way of eating to create even better results. Gentle, appropriate exercise is crucial. When my pain was at its worst, even the thought of exercise seemed impossible. But as the dietary changes began to reduce my inflammation and pain, I was able to start moving more. I began with water exercises at our local community center. The buoyancy of the water made movement painless. From there, I progressed to gentle walking, and eventually to a senior yoga class specifically designed for people with joint issues. What I discovered was a positive feedback loop. The anti-inflammatory foods reduced my pain enough to exercise, and the exercise further reduced inflammation and strengthened the muscles around my joints, creating even less pain. Now, movement is non-negotiable in my daily routine, even if it's just a 15-minute gentle yoga session on days when my joints are more troublesome. Quality sleep is another critical factor. When I don't sleep well, my pain is invariably worse the next day. I've developed a bedtime routine that helps ensure good sleep. No screens for an hour before bed, my turmeric golden milk, a little light stretching, and a cool, dark bedroom. These simple habits have dramatically improved my sleep quality, which in turn helps manage inflammation. Stress management is the third pillar of my approach. Chronic stress increases inflammation. That's a scientific fact. I found that 10 to 15 minutes of simple meditation each day makes a noticeable difference in both my pain levels and my ability to cope with pain when it does occur. I use a free app that guides me through basic breathing exercises, nothing fancy or spiritual, just practical techniques to calm the nervous system. As I bring this story to a close, I want to share the most important lesson I've learned on this journey. Hope matters. When my doctor first diagnosed me with advanced osteoarthritis, the unspoken message was clear: things will only get worse from here. Accept your limitations. Lower your expectations. But that's not the message I want to leave you with today. Yes, joint problems are serious. Yes, conditions like arthritis are chronic and degenerative. But no, that doesn't mean you're powerless or that declining function is inevitable. There is so much we can do through our daily choices to influence how these conditions affect our lives. 3 years ago, I thought my active life was over. I was mentally preparing myself for increasing dependency and disability. Today, at 71, I'm more active and capable than I was at 68. I still have arthritis that hasn't changed, but how it impacts my daily life has changed dramatically. I can play with my grandchildren again. I can tend my garden. I can walk through the farmer's market without a cane. I can button my own shirts and open my own jars. These may seem like small victories to some, but for those of us with joint pain, these everyday capabilities are precious beyond measure. If you're struggling with joint pain right now, I want you to know that small changes can lead to significant improvements. You don't have to overhaul your entire diet overnight. Start with just 1 or 2 of these foods. Perhaps begin with fatty fish twice a week, or add turmeric to your cooking. See how your body responds, and then gradually incorporate more of these beneficial foods. Keep a journal to track your progress, and not just your pain levels, but also what you can do. Maybe today you can only walk to the end of your driveway, but in a month you might make it to the corner. Celebrate these victories. They matter. And please be patient with yourself and with this process. The inflammatory conditions that affect our joints didn't develop overnight, and they won't be resolved overnight either. This is a marathon, not a sprint. But I can tell you from personal experience, the journey is worth it. I'd also encourage you to work with healthcare providers who are open to complementary approaches. My primary care doctor was initially skeptical but became supportive when she saw my improved lab results and reduced need for pain medication. A good healthcare provider should be willing to work with you on integrative approaches to managing your condition. Before I close, I want to address a question I hear often. Isn't it too late for me? I'm already in my 70s divided by 80s divided by 90s. My answer is an emphatic no. It's never too late to make changes that improve your quality of life. Our bodies continue to respond to positive inputs regardless of age. The improvements might be more modest or take longer to achieve, but they're still possible and still worthwhile. I hope my story has given you some practical ideas and, more importantly, a sense of possibility. Joint pain doesn't have to define your later years or limit your enjoyment of life. With the right foods and lifestyle approaches, you can reduce inflammation, improve mobility, and reclaim activities that bring you joy. If you found this information helpful, please consider sharing it with others who might benefit. And I'd love to hear about your experiences. What foods have helped your joint health? What challenges have you overcome? We can learn so much from each other's journeys. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Here's to your health, your mobility, and your independence at every age.